Meanwhile, we want to talk about the latest story around foreign policy, and that is John Kerry is under fire. Special Climate Envoy Kerry denying allegations this morning that he informed the Iranian foreign minister of covert Israeli military operations while serving as President Obama's Secretary of State. In leaked audio tapes, Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said that Kerry shockingly informed him that Israel attacked Iranian targets in Syria over 200 times. Kerry is now facing calls to resign from his position as President Biden's climate czar. Joining me right now is retired four-star General, Fox News senior strategic analyst, General Jack Keane. General, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks very much for joining us, particularly on this very troubling story. First of all, I'd love to know how you see this, whether or not John Kerry picked this information up, because we were spying on Israel to begin with. We get this information from Israel, and he passes it on to Iran?
Well, first of all, this is an allegation. We don't know what the actual truth is. We do know that Foreign Minister Zarif, and doing his oral history on the administration he's serving, makes a number of stunning revelations, and certainly this is one of them. But are we really surprised here? I mean, this is the same John Kerry who, during the Trump administration, when he was out of office, was cozying up to the Iranians during that time and undermining U.S. policy. In other words, he was telling the Iranians, and this is what we got from the Department of State and the Secretary of State, that this was actually happening. He was telling the Iranians not to follow and go along with the Trump administration, wait it out, and a new administration, obviously a Democratic one, would come in and be more friendlier to you. That was completely unprecedented. We've never had anybody doing anything like that in terms of undermining foreign policy. Disagreeing with foreign policy, to be sure, but undermining it with a foreign power, that's something else again. So I don't think we're surprised. We don't know truly what the facts are, but we just can't be surprised by what is happening. And certainly it's worthy of an investigation to take a look and see what really did take place here.
Yeah, we're waiting for more information. What we know right now is that there are new leaked audio tapes, and the audio appears to reveal that Kerry, and of course we know that Kerry, along with many others from the Obama administration, are now on Biden's foreign policy team. He is the special climate envoy. He divulged to Zarif the details of over 200 clandestine Israeli military operations taken against Iranian targets in the last several years. He's always been obviously cozying up, as you say, to the Iranians. If this is confirmed, what an incredible disgrace. If this is confirmed, should he step down, in your view?
Well, I think it was confirmed. There would be no doubt about it. He would be asked to step down. I don't see how the administration could have anybody serving them in any capacity whatsoever who committed such an egregious violation. And what's happening here, so our audience understands, with the leaking of these tapes, is that they're also trying to discredit Foreign Minister Zarif, who has a very heavy hand in the negotiations that the Iranians are doing. And these are the hardliners, and Zarif is considered to be a moderate. And the hardliners certainly don't want to give an inch in to the United States and our allies over the return to the nuclear deal. And believe me, we all have a lot of concern in terms of the direction these negotiations are taking as the United States is about to lift sanctions on Iran in return for Iran's full compliance with the deal. If they lift all the sanctions and don't try to improve the deal, we have squandered a significant strategic opportunity here, and I think it'll be considered a significant failure if that does occur.
You know, you've got to explain how it is that the U.S. is now considering getting back into this Iranian nuclear deal, all the while U.S. and Iranian warships having a tense encounter in the Persian Gulf earlier this month. This, according to the Navy, as you know, a group of ships commanded by Iran's Revolutionary Guard swarmed 2 different U.S. Coast Guard ships on patrol in the Persian Gulf, cutting in front of them, forcing the Coast Guard ships to make abrupt stops to avoid possible collisions. The encounters would be the first incident between the 2 nations in over a year, General. This, as Joe Biden is negotiating and trying to get us back into the Iran deal. By the way, we should point out that there was a meeting on this just a week and a half ago. The U.S. wasn't even invited. It was China, Russia, Iran talking about the Iran deal. But what's your take on this near collision in the Persian Gulf?
Yeah, well, this is, as you said, it's done by the Revolutionary Guards, and they work for the supreme leader. That they're not a part of the normal military organization. What I think has taken place here is a couple things. First of all, this used to be a pattern of behavior in the past, and it was done mostly because it gets a lot of press. It's done mostly for our allies in the region, where Iran is demonstrating to them, and look, we're the major power here in the Middle East. The United States is a foreign interventionist, and look at us. We can intimidate and harass the United States at will here. But our allies don't buy into it. They don't see the United States as being weakened as a result of this. They know who the real maritime power is in the Persian Gulf, to be sure. But why now? I think it's also here, Revolutionary Guards, very hardliners in Iran, election coming up in June. I think this is being done to put more pressure on the Iranian negotiators to make certain that they take a very hardline stand dealing with the United States, much as they did back in 2015. They want to see a replay of that, where the United States comes out of this deal having given up all of the sanctions of Iran and losing all the leverage that we have. You know, the momentum in the Middle East has turned against the Iranians, and that is what is really regrettable and unfortunate. The Biden administration doesn't use all of that leverage that exists in the Middle East as a result of the Abraham Accords, the normalization with Israel. Why are those Arab countries normalizing relations with Israel? Because of the threat of Iran. This is the beginning of a formation of an Arab NATO. And that is really what's at stake here. There's huge leverage against the Iranians, and we should use it to our advantage to protect our allies in the Middle East.
So do you worry that the Abraham Accords, those 5 countries that have said, yes, we will normalize relations with Israel as a result of the United States, Mike Pompeo doing this negotiating over the last several years, are those Abraham Accords in jeopardy if the U.S. gets back into the Iran deal?
It's going to put huge pressure on it, for sure. The Arabs came together with Israel as a result of the invitation of the United States to just do that. The United States, in the name of President Trump in July of 2017, told the Arab states that he would stand against them dealing with the strategic threat of Iran. That kind of strength, now that our allies are looking at the negotiations, and believe me, none of the Arab states or Israelis agree with the negotiations that are going on, because they believe the United States will give up the farm, so to speak, will give up all of these sanctions and have nothing in return. What we want in return is to curb their behavior in the region. That's what they would say, number one, and stop their proxy wars, and certainly prohibit the development and production of ballistic missiles and anywhere, anytime inspections, to be sure. Improvement can be made here. Whether the United States has the mental toughness to do that remains to be seen, and that is what the concern our allies in the region have, Maria.
I could imagine. And we're still trying to, quickly on China, we are still trying to get allies to better understand the China threat. But I haven't seen any tough policy against China either. What is going on with the current foreign policy? We are cozying up to our adversaries like Iran and China.
Well, I think the Biden administration, frankly, has done much better dealing with China. They have pretty much adopted most of the tough policies of the Trump administration. They have taken a stand. They have met with our allies in the region to deal with China, to make certain that we're united in pushing back on China. The first foreign president that Biden met with was the president of Japan, certainly Prime Minister of Japan, excuse me, and he got an earful about China. The Secretary of State and Defense have been out in the region doing much the same thing. I think they're moving in China. They got the message. Okay. A lot has changed in 4 years since dealing with China. We still have to see if they have the toughness to confront China. When China's aggression starts to spill over even more than what it currently is. And it will happen, dealing with Taiwan and also the South China Sea. That remains to be seen. Right now, the rhetoric is good, policy is good. We'll see if the toughness is really there.
Yeah, well, step one might be to try to put their feet to the fire on the coronavirus and bring up the issue, where did the coronavirus originate, Xi Jinping? That subject apparently has not come up. Peter Doocy asked Joe Biden the question a couple of weeks ago. He said, no, that hasn't come up. Go figure. General, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks very much. Great conversation.
Yeah, great talking to you, Maria.